When Russia attacked Ukraine in 2022, the Western media was completely convinced that their economic sanctions would bring Russia to its knees. Headlines from CNN, BBC, and others were everywhere, claiming that Russia's economy would collapse within weeks and Putin would have no choice but to back down. But now, 3 years later, the ground reality is completely different. Not only is Russia still holding its ground in Ukraine, but its economy has actually become even stronger than before. In 2022, Russia's GDP growth was around 3%, and by 2024, it has reached 4.1%. Unemployment in Russia is also at its lowest levels today, and that's not all. This is despite so many sanctions. In just 2024, Russia has earned more than $220 billion from oil and gas exports. The most shocking thing is that despite 3 years of combined military and economic pressure from the West and NATO, Russia has also managed to capture the eastern and southern regions of Ukraine. Now, those same NATO leaders who were earlier claiming Russia's defeat are today discussing in their secret meetings how Russia managed to stand firm against the entire Western world. How did this happen? Russia has shaken the world's biggest economies and military alliances. In today's video, we will search for the answer to this very question. Russia's deep strategies that have stunned the entire Western world. These are the strategies that might just bring Russia back onto the list of world superpowers. But it took Russia decades to reach this point. Sanctions on Russia are not a new concept. Since the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Western countries have been trying to push Russia into economic isolation. In the beginning, the Russian economy did feel some pressure. The value of the ruble fell, and some international institutions also started distancing themselves from Russia. But then, in February 2022, there came a turning point that changed the entire geopolitical equation. As soon as the Ukraine war began, Western nations imposed the mother of all sanctions on Russia. Russian banks were cut off from SWIFT. $300 billion of reserves kept in Europe were frozen, and massive restrictions were imposed on the energy sector. The US imposed a direct ban on Russian oil, gas, and coal. And after that, Europe also gradually started reducing its oil and gas imports from Russia. But even then, not only did Russia survive, it delivered shocks to the West that no one could have imagined. Now, here's where the real twist begins. When 40% of Europe's energy supply came from Russia, the sanctions initially had an immediate impact on Russia. Oil prices suddenly skyrocketed. The price of a barrel shot up above $120. The Russian ruble completely collapsed. Panic spread everywhere, and experts began predicting that Russia was about to collapse. Even the president of the European Commission said that Russia wouldn't be able to withstand such heavy sanctions. Western media was running headlines every day saying that the Russian economy only had a few days left. But what happened next shocked the whole world. Instead of getting weaker, Russia started adapting rapidly. Instead of its economy collapsing, it suddenly began to rebound. Russia is the third largest oil producer in the world. When Europe and America banned Russian oil, Russia immediately changed its direction. It turned away from Europe and focused on Asia, especially China and India. Russia offered these countries massive discounts and special deals, and as a result, by 2024, Russia-China trade volume crossed $200 billion. India, which earlier imported only a nominal amount of oil from Russia, has now become Russia's biggest buyer. In 2022, India's oil imports from Russia were almost zero, but by 2024, this had increased to 1.8 million barrels per day. And this is where Russia's second master strategy began, Shadow Fleet. Russia created a secret shipping network, which includes more than 400 oil tankers that operate beyond the reach of sanctions. This shadow fleet operates under the names of small or anonymous owners, whom Western laws or sanctions cannot track down. These ships are often registered in countries where regulations are very lax, making it nearly impossible to trace their real owners. The biggest trick of these ships is that they turn off their GPS, frequently change their routes, and transfer oil to other tankers at a fixed point in the open sea. Then those tankers deliver the oil to different countries, and no one even suspects that the oil came from Russia. With this secret shipping strategy, Russia continued its massive oil exports to China, India, Turkey, and many other markets. As a result, despite heavy sanctions in 2024, Russia earned more than $220 billion from energy exports. In other words, Russia kept up its oil exports right in front of the whole world, and no one even got a chance to stop them. As soon as the Ukraine war began, Russia rapidly increased its defense budget. Orders were placed for massive production of weapon factories, military vehicles, tanks, and ammunition. By 2024, Russia's defense budget had reached $132 billion, which made up 6% of its GDP. In other words, this itself became an economic booster for Russia's economy. Now, when weapons started being produced everywhere, naturally the steel, electronics, transport, and technology industries also began to grow rapidly, because it's from these industries that weapons are made. This gave Russia two advantages. First, the things Russia used to import earlier were now being produced in local factories. And second, because of such massive production, thousands of people across the country got employment. Russia's unemployment rate reached a record low in 2024, and millions of new jobs were created in the economy. At the same time, to further strengthen this war economy, Russia also relied on infrastructure projects. New roads, railway lines, airports, and military bases were built, which gave a big boost to local industries and the construction sector as well. Factories, farms, and businesses started growing everywhere to meet the demands of the war. But there's a gray area in this model that many economists keep raising again and again. Such massive military spending can lead to increased inflation and slow down long-term innovation. We will discuss this in more detail later in the video. But so far, Russia's strategy has been surprisingly successful, despite Western sanctions. Not only that, even back in 2012, when financial sanctions were imposed on Russia, the main goal of Western countries was to push Russia out of the dollar system so that its international trade would come to a halt. But Russia played a completely different game here as well. Russia adopted a de-dollarization strategy, meaning a strategy to get rid of the dollar. It started trading not in dollars, but in Chinese yuan, Indian rupees, Turkish lira, and even gold. The biggest breakthrough came in yuan trade with Chuzar. By 2024, nearly half of Russia-China trade was happening without the dollar. The trade volume between the two countries crossed $244 billion, and all of this trade was being conducted in yuan and rubles. In other words, Western sanctions became completely ineffective. India also became a key partner in Russia's strategy. Until 2022, there was almost zero use of the rupee in India-Russia trade. But by 2024, India was buying billions of dollars worth of oil and gas from Russia in Indian rupees. Both countries also set up direct payment channels, eliminating the need for the Western banking system. Russia has basically brought together all of Asia to build a parallel trade system that doesn't depend on the dollar at all. After the sanctions, Russia didn't just focus on its external trade strategy, but also rapidly activated its domestic economy. In this whole process, Russia adopted a very critical strategy, boosting domestic demand and high government spending. Russia knew that the economy runs on people spending money. If people don't spend, then factories, shopkeepers, and transport, everything will come to a halt. That's why, as soon as the sanctions were imposed, Russia immediately started giving out large economic stimulus packages and subsidies, so that ordinary people wouldn't get scared and stop spending. The government imposed price controls on basic goods, provided energy subsidies, and gave tax cuts to encourage import substitution for essential items. This made ordinary Russians feel that their economy was stable. Panic decreased and the consumption cycle sped up. At this point, another thing came to light. Russia also used its national debt, that is, government borrowing, smartly. Russia is one of the few countries in the world with very low external debt. This means that compared to other countries, it could easily take loans. Russia exploited this advantage during the war economy period, and by borrowing aggressively, increased spending on infrastructure, defense, and welfare programs. The biggest secret of this whole process was that Russia didn't just focus on the military economy, but also worked on consumer confidence. That's why, despite the sanctions, domestic production in Russia increased, domestic spending went up, and employment reached an all-time high. Now, Russia's economy doesn't just depend on exports. Its domestic economy has become so large that it's hard to put external pressure on it. That's why Russia adopted a strategy to move away from the dollar, which was fully supported by the BRICS countries. Now, BRICS nations are trying to introduce a common currency as an alternative to the dollar. If this turns out to be successful, it will be like a financial reset for the entire world, and all sanctions will become ineffective. Russia increased domestic spending and demand in war mode, kept unemployment low, and managed its economy thanks to low national debt. Investors remain confident that Russia would not default. But this model also has its limits. Domestic spending is causing inflation to rise, and too much dependence on a war economy could harm other sectors. The biggest challenge for Russia is the technology gap. Because of Western sanctions, Russia isn't getting advanced technology, and local alternatives haven't reached that level yet. Now, the real question is, can Russia's model last for the long term? So far, Russia has proven every prediction wrong. Western sanctions have brought Russia and the BRICS countries even closer, which is actually weakening the West itself. The truth is, Russia has started to change the world's balance of power. The era of the West is ending, and now it's the East's turn. Now we'll have to see how true these things turn out to be in the coming years, and this is just the beginning. I'll take you further into stories of geography, power, conflicts, and survival that'll blow your mind. So make sure to subscribe, because the next episode could change the way you look at the world map forever.